September 16, 1992. The Bank of England spent £27 billion in a single day trying to defend the currency, but the pound plummeted anyway, and an investor named George Soros walked away with $1 billion in profit. Black Wednesday was not just a market crash, it was the moment one man outmaneuvered an entire government. This is how a flaw in Europe's grand currency system set the stage for a financial coup. In 1979, European leaders gathered to launch the exchange rate mechanism, a system designed to lock national currencies into narrow bands, all tethered to the stability of the German mark. The idea was simple. By fixing exchange rates, Europe could avoid the wild swings that had rattled markets for years. But beneath the surface, the system demanded discipline. Every country had to defend its currency's value, no matter the cost. Britain watched from the sidelines for over a decade, wary of giving up control. When the UK finally joined the ERM in October 1990, government officials set the pound's central rate at 2.95 Deutsche Marks. This was a bold move, higher than many economists believed the pound could sustain. British inflation was running at nearly 3 times the German rate. Industry leaders warned the pound was already too expensive for exporters. Yet the government pressed ahead, convinced that a strong pound would anchor inflation and prove Britain belonged in Europe's monetary club. The rules were unforgiving. Sterling could only move within a narrow plus or minus 6% band around that central rate. If it slipped too low, the Bank of England had to step in, buying pounds with foreign reserves or hiking interest rates. Germany, meanwhile, was dealing with the aftershocks of reunification and kept its own interest rates high to control inflation. For the UK, this meant importing German monetary policy at the worst possible moment. From the very start, the pound's official value was set above what the economy could bear. The ERM had been built to enforce monetary stability, but for Britain, it became a straitjacket, a system that demanded strength when the fundamentals pointed the other way. By 1991, Britain's economy was already deep in recession. Unemployment was climbing, the housing market was collapsing, and businesses faced shrinking demand. Under normal circumstances, the Bank of England would have cut interest rates to ease the pain, but membership in the exchange rate mechanism left no room for that. The rules demanded that the pound stay strong against the Deutsche Mark, no matter how weak the domestic economy became. Across the Channel, Germany was fighting its own battle. Reunification had triggered a surge in inflation, and the Bundesbank responded by pushing interest rates higher and higher. For Britain, this meant importing Germany's tight money at exactly the wrong moment. Every rate hike in Frankfurt echoed through London, making British mortgages and loans more expensive just as incomes were falling. The result was a squeeze with no escape. British households saw their payments rise while wages stagnated. Factories struggled to compete with a pound that was too expensive for foreign buyers. The government had staked its reputation on keeping the pound fixed at 2.95 marks, but every month that passed made the gap between policy and reality wider. Ministers insisted that the pain was temporary, that discipline would bring recovery and credibility. But on trading floors, the numbers told a different story. Britain needed relief, lower rates and a cheaper pound, but the exchange rate mechanism locked every door. The pressure built with each passing quarter, and the market began to watch for the first sign of a break. George Soros had a reputation for spotting what others missed. In early 1992, he saw the pound's predicament for what it was: a bet against arithmetic. The rules of the exchange rate mechanism demanded a strong pound, but Britain's economy needed relief. Soros, running the Quantum Fund, began building a position that dwarfed anything the currency markets had seen. By September 1992, his team had quietly shorted sterling to the tune of $10 billion. That meant borrowing pounds, selling them for Deutsche Marks, and waiting. If the pound held, he would lose. But if it broke, every percentage point drop would translate directly into profit. The mechanics were simple, but the scale was staggering. Imagine borrowing £100 when the rate stood at 2.95 marks to the pound, 295 marks. If the pound dropped 15%, That same 295 marks would buy back 117.76 pounds. The profit was 17.76 pounds on every 100 pounds multiplied by billions. For Quantum, this was not just a trade. It was a wager on inevitability. The exchange rate mechanism boxed in the British government, and Soros saw there was no painless escape. None of this was secret, and none of it was illegal. Shorting a currency in this way, borrowing, selling, and buying back later, was standard practice. What set Soros apart was his conviction and the sheer size of his bet. As word spread through the trading world that Quantum was moving in size, other funds began to follow. The pressure on sterling started to mount, and the Bank of England was about to face the full force of the market. On Sunday, September 13, 1992, the Italian government bowed to the inevitable. After burning through reserves and failing to convince markets, Italy devalued the lira by 7% inside the exchange rate mechanism. The message to traders was unmistakable. Fixed exchange rates could be forced to bend. By Monday morning, the focus shifted. Sterling, already weakened by recession and locked into a high rate, became the next target. Dealer reports from London and New York lit up with orders to sell pounds. Hedge funds, proprietary trading desks, and even corporate treasuries joined the rush. The Bank of England, bound by exchange rate mechanism rules, stepped in as the buyer of last resort, soaking up wave after wave of selling. But every intervention only encouraged more. In the days following the lira realignment, sterling volume surged, the pound traded near the bottom of its band, and the cost of defending it soared. Traders watched for any sign of official weakness. When Bundesbank President Helmut Schlesinger hinted at the need for a wider realignment on September 15th, selling pressure on the pound became relentless. Market chatter grew louder. If Italy could devalue, why not Britain? By the evening before Black Wednesday, the Bank of England was facing a coordinated assault from every corner of the financial world. What began as one fund's conviction had turned into a full-scale systemic attack. The pound was now up against not just one trader, but the collective force of global markets, all betting that the exchange rate mechanism's next casualty would be sterling. At the opening bell on September 16th, the Bank of England went straight to work. Billions in foreign reserves were thrown into the market, buying sterling as fast as traders could sell it. The phones in the dealing rooms never stopped. Every pound the bank bought was met by another wave of selling, as hedge funds and banks lined up to unload their positions. By mid-morning, the scale of intervention was unmatched. Up to £2 billion an hour were being spent, reserves draining with no sign of relief. At 11 a.m., the Treasury made its first move. Interest rates were raised from 10% to 12%, effective immediately. The announcement was meant to shock the market, to make holding sterling more attractive. Instead, it landed with disbelief. Britain was already in recession. Interest rates of 12% would punish borrowers, squeeze homeowners, and threaten businesses. Instead of calming the market, the selling intensified. The government's resolve looked brittle, and credibility began to crack. At 2:15 in the afternoon, the government made its final gamble, announcing that interest rates would soar to 15%. For a country already deep in recession, the number sounded unreal. Traders did not flinch. Within minutes, selling intensified. The market saw the move for what it was, a last, desperate bluff. Hours later, at 7:40 in the evening, the Chancellor stepped in front of the cameras. Britain was suspending its ERM membership. The pound was set free and the currency plunged nearly 15% against the mark. £27 billion had been spent trying to hold the line. On trading screens, Soros's profit ticker rolled past $1 billion. The verdict was immediate and absolute. The market had called the government's bluff and the pound broke. Today, global markets move faster than any government can react. Central banks still defend currencies, but algorithms and capital cross borders in seconds. Black Wednesday proved reality always wins over denial. In finance, the cost of ignoring the facts is measured in billions. Thanks for watching.